Well, we hope everyone's having a wonderful Friday. We know we sure are down here at the museum. So, this is day 3 of our residency. The pieces that we see on our pedestals we're going to create right now. These pieces were made on Wednesday, so the first day of the residency. Now, we do have a skull as an example on this table. We got to point out that our visiting artist brought along a lot of these skulls from his studio. So both of our visiting artists are working in the center. We have Michael Schunke in the center, and then Josie Gluck right alongside. Now together they operate Vetrovero Glassblowing and Design Studio, which is located in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So for 5 days, this team will be taking over our studio. And this is the first time we're really going to see all the artwork really come together. Up to this point, we've been working on parts that Michael had made in his studio just to speed up the process for us so we can hit the ground running when they arrived. It's hard to believe, but that bubble in a few hours will be transformed into a skull. And it's hard to believe, but the majority of things that you see in the gallery, in the store, at one point or another looked similar to what we have on the end of the blowpipe, essentially a mass or a bubble that can then be manipulated. We'll notice that one of our visiting artists is blowing a little bit of air. So where's our visiting artist going? He's stepping off the hot shop and we're just getting started. Well, you'll notice the color of the glass that we're working with, right? It's just a unique color. Now, in the history of the Museum of Glass is the first time we've ever made color here at the museum. So what we took is a rare earth metal and we placed it inside of our furnace on our right. It holds 1,000 pounds, but we melted 400 colors of this neodymium glass. It looks like this purple color under this light, but under fluorescent light, it will look more of a grayish color. So it's a dichroic colored glass. And this is a first for us here at the museum. When we're done using this colored glass and with this residency, we will go back to melting clear glass. Now, we like to use clear glass specifically, so we're not stuck with one specific color throughout the process. But for today's residency, we have decided to go this route. So the team just added a layer of a clear powdered glass just to dull out the glossiness of the glass. The same effect will happen to the tops that are created as well. So we want to break down a little bit of what's going to be occurring. So just like drawing a skull, we start off by just creating the basic features, maybe the jawline, the eye sockets, and then for the rest, we'll just jump around the whole bubble, around the whole face. That's just to ensure that when we're working on an area, since it's hot, we're not going to continue to manipulate it. Rather, we'll let that freeze up and then come back to it later on to apply more details. So we're using a reheating chamber directly in front of us. It's about 2,300 degrees. There's no glass inside of there. It's just fire and heat. It's about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And when we go inside, it turns everything hot. In this case, we don't need everything hot. We just need one specific area. So we can isolate the heat using our smaller torches. This small torch is one of the hotter ones on the equipment. It's about 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is hot enough to even boil away the color that we're using in our material. And we have a pretty large team here joining us. And at one point, everyone's talent will be utilized. So everyone's hands will be working today. Now we'll notice that during the process, our visiting artist takes a seat at the center. We refer to Michael as our gaffer. So the gaffer is the person who's in charge calling the shots, right? And Michael has been working with glass for over 30 years. So a lot of these steps, he makes it look really easy, but that's because he has 30 years under his belt. Now, our visiting artist teaches internationally around the globe, but he's also been an associate professor in the Toyoma Institute of Glass in Japan. Our second visiting artist, Josie Gluck, on our right, she's taught at Haystack Mountain School of Craft, and that is located on the other coast. Now, if you want to see some of the artwork that was created besides here at the museum, there you can see some of Michael's work right now in Seattle at the Tree Gallery, so just across the street from the Seattle Art Museum. Once again, the Tree Gallery. So let's introduce our next team member, Courtney Branham. Courtney Branham is working in the center with the black t-shirt. Now, he's part of our staff here at the Museum of Glass. He's been working with glass for over 25 years, and he's playing the role as the pole turner. So just giving the adequate heats that maybe our gaffer has called for. You'll notice also our visiting artist, Josie Gluck, is sitting by, preparing to blow air through the blowpipe. If we're asked to blow, we blow about the same air pressure you use to blow out a candle. We're also concerned when we're pushing the glass that we can collapse or maybe even deflate that skull a little bit. For that reason, if we hear cap, that means placing our finger or our palm over the blowpipe hole, ensuring that we have a sealed environment. Oh, that's a wonderful shot, Derek. So again, there's no glass inside of there. The longer we spend inside of here, that hotter that glass gets. Now, if we spend too long in here, the glass can get too soft, and the heat is the biggest eraser here in the studio. So all those defined lines can disappear if we stay too long inside of the glory hole. So you'll notice when we're making skulls and sculpting with glass, we'll bounce around the bubble a lot in a lot of different locations. That's just because if we're working on the eye socket area and then we make a detail and continue working, that detail will just eventually melt away. So for that reason, Michael will just heat up one spot, work on it a little bit, and then maybe go on the opposite end of that and begin to work. For this residency, I do recommend the top balcony. When it slows down, I'm going to hang up there because it's probably the best view for this residency. I've been excited for Michael Schunke to take over our studio with Josie Gluck. Michael's considered to be one of the best American glass makers in goblet making. As the residency progresses, we will increase the scale of these as well. So we're now preparing to transfer our skull onto another rod. By transferring it to its next rod, we can begin to work on the bottom half of the face. So we're squeezing down what we like to call a jack line or a neckline. That's our fancy glass making terms for our break-off area. So how we separate our skull from the rod itself is from our jack line. All right, so Courtney Branham on our right-hand side again, one of our members here at the museum. Our gaffer, Michael, has now called for the punty. So it's up to Courtney to create our transfer rod. And the punty is the fancy term that we glass makers use to define the transfer rod. Some glass makers will call it pontil as well. Either way, it's only a temporary rod. This rod needs to be strong enough to withstand all the tugging and pulling that will be happening as we sculpt the bottom half. It also needs to be weak enough to break later on in the demonstration. So we're always looking for that Goldilocks zone. And depending on what we're making will dictate the type of punty or the type of transfer rod. And there's various types of punties to choose from as a glass maker. Now in this case, we're bringing over this glass hot enough that it's going to fuse on there, which will give us our strength. right, so that puntee is now strong enough to withstand that pulling and tugging that will occur. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg, everyone. Even what we see on our pedestals are not complete. There is a top that goes along. And yesterday we created these. They have a raven on the top. We can show you some images on our big screen as our residency progresses. But we use the annealer that is on our left-hand side, so the oven with the green number 1. Around lunchtime, we will be able to bring out the tops and place them in corresponding goblets. And again, our 2 visiting artists own and operate Vetrovero Glass Blowing Design Studio based in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So for 5 days, this team will take over the Museum of Glass. In those 5 days, they can do whatever they like. The museum annually goes through about 15 tons of glass. If you're joining us, welcome to the museum. Thanks for stopping by. So we started this project at opening, so about 40 minutes ago or so, and we can see how far we are in the creation of our skull. Now, we added a layer of clear glass, powdered glass on the surface, and you'll notice that we've dulled out the glass. It doesn't look so reflective and so shiny, and we added a layer of powdered glass. And that same effect happened to the top. We created a raven that's on the surface, and it has the same effect as the skull. So at this time, let's just learn a little bit about the equipment that we're working with as our team continues to hot sculpt. We're using the heat of our reheating chamber, 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. It's powered by natural gas, like much of our equipment at the museum. You'll notice that we use a lot of these smaller handheld torches. We're using them to isolate the heat because the reheating chamber gets everything hot. So when we're working on underneath the skull, we have to think about that there's going to be a transitional bit that's placed on there. So we need to make sure that that flap that's folded inwards is going to be stable enough to hold the bottom half of our goblet in place. And it's these little details that you won't really see until you hold it or you look at it from an under angle, but it's very important to our team that it looks great in all angles when completed. And you'll notice that a lot of this is just refining and refining. We start off by just creating some basic features, but earlier the team had put it, first they start off with the basic sketch, and then we can finish the final details later on. So although we're focusing on the mouth area where the teeth are located, you'll notice that our visiting artist still torches the rod itself. Now, that's because the steel rod is stealing heat from the glass. So if a crack is going to form, it will start at the steel rod. So as long as we can maintain that temperature, a crack shouldn't form or shouldn't spread. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for stopping by here at the museum. We're in day three of 5 days with our visiting artist, Michael Schunke, playing the role as our gaffer here today. He's in charge. We've been working for this piece since 10 o'clock, a little bit before 10 o'clock. We're almost done. Last details. But we don't settle here at the museum. So if it doesn't look right, we'll just keep on going. So if we have to take a lunch, so what? We'll just push it back. And we're going to make this goblet in the traditional Venetian style of working with glass. Our visiting artist working in the center is trained under two the most prestigious Italian glass masters. So the same techniques and style that we see being utilized right now are the same exact ones that are being used in Murano, Italy at this time as well. So just as a quick overview, when we're done, when we're completed with the skull, we have our temporary oven. This garage is floating in the center of the studio, and it's an oven that we can place the glass and prevents it from breaking and cracking. So we're going to make all of these elements first. So first is the skull, then the stem, and the final thing will be the cup. Both of those two parts will sit inside of our garage until we are ready to bring them out, and then we can join everything one by one. The transfer rod and the punty is going to be located inside of the cup, and everything will be worked off of the rod. So things are going to get really intense here at the museum in a little while. This piece should take us all the way till lunchtime. We're planning on taking our lunch at 1 o'clock. My name is David, by the way, everyone. If you have a question about what's going on, let me know, all right? You have a question? Okay. All right, that's a test. That's a good test. Yes, the top. Okay, so what we see on the pedestals were made on Wednesday. Now, our visiting artist actually created a few of these skulls in his home studio. So he just brought some along so we can hit the floor running with some already out. But we've essentially run out of skulls already since the first day. This is our last one, I believe. So we need to make more right now. We're going to keep this as an example. Michael, for the rest of the day, will be creating completed goblets. So we'll put one together, and then we'll start all over again. So far, we have nothing inside of our garage. This will be the first element that's placed inside. And we'll follow the process on this next one. I'll introduce the team and all our equipment and how even that color got into our glass. In the museum's history, this is the first time we've ever made color here at the museum because we have an incredible glass maker right now. So this color that we're seeing is a dichroic color. So depending on the light will dictate its color. If it's under a fluorescent light, it will look more of a grayish color, gray transparent. I love this color as it is already. Either way, we took 400 pounds of clear glass and we added neodymiums, so a rare earth metal, crushed it up, mixed it around for an hour, and then placed 400 pounds of this material inside of our furnace. Once we are out of this colored glass, we will go back to clear glass for the remainder. For the duration, you're absolutely right, Derek. Yep. All right. So we'll follow our team along for these next few steps. And for today's demonstration, I would highly recommend checking out our demonstration at our top balcony. I've been hanging out here or out up there during the slow time, and it's just an incredible view. You can also do all different forms of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We love to hear about your experience over online. You can even tag our visiting artists on their Instagram that we've laid out. Michael Schunke at the Goblet Ninja. Yes, that is his nickname. We can tell why from the examples on our pedestals. And you can also follow Joyzy. So our residency with our visiting artists will conclude this coming Sunday with a lecture given at 2 p.m. There, Michael will explain a little bit more about the artwork that was explored here at the museum and how we got to where he is right now. Once again, at 2 p.m. this coming Sunday. If you can't join us in person, you can always join us online through the web at the Museum of Glass website and also on our YouTube channel where we live stream everything we see in front of us here. So one of the last steps that we take before we will put our skull away is introducing more heat into the punty. So right now that punty looks quite cold, so we want a little bit more red, a little more orange glow coming off of it. We're just making sure that at no point our glass is feeling any stress. Stress is when the glass drops below 900 degrees where it can begin to crack and explode due to the ambient temperature difference. So if you would like to watch a condensed version of this, there's also a great video online. If you Google or even just YouTube Michael Schunke, there's an online video of this process, a condensed version. Besides that, you can always follow the Museum of Glass. We will also post images and videos of what was created, as well as on our social media platforms. We'll post a video of some of the artwork that was explored maybe that week. And of course, we like to hear about your experience, so you can always tag the Museum of Glass and you can tag Vetrovero. And both of our visiting artists own and operate Vetrovero Glass Blowing Design Studio in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Well, another rod has been gathered upon, and we need to begin to take a look at our skull and notice that there's a transitional bit located on the top and the bottom as well. But we also need to clean up where that punty is at, where our rod is located up right now. As we can see in our example, there is quite some residue left over, and we don't want to use it if there's that residue left over. So let's go ahead, transfer it to another rod. Again, we glass makers define this as a punty or ponto, as some glass makers will call it. Either way, it's only a temporary rod. And you notice that this transfer rod that we brought over, there was a ball on the very top. That ball is where that transitional bit will be placed on. So now that our punty is hot, we can kind of push it around. We want to make sure that we can find the center of that skull. So the very top of it, where that transitional bit will be placed at, it should be a good location. So we quickly just adjust it, making sure that we're turning at an even rate, that it's on center. We are also I believe they will also add a layer of powdered clear glass on the surface of this piece. By adding that layer of powdered glass, we're able to dull down the shininess of the glass and produce more of a matte finish. All right. Once again, this is just powdered clear glass. When we're working with a powdered material, we do it in a safe environment where that powder can be sucked out of the museum and not go into our lungs. And that's because we work at a museum here. We take a lot of safety precautions, even with what we wear. Ooh, so okay, so the didinium. We'll notice when we come over to this colored glass that we are working with is a dichroic colored glass. So depending on the type of light will dictate its color. We can see that under the light that we have in our powder box, it looks more of a bluish color than this purplish color that we see. And under a fluorescent light, it will turn a transparent gray, which I want to see that. I should have brought one of those black lights, portable ones, but hey, maybe next time. So we're pretty much complete with our skull. What's up, everyone? How you doing today? You enjoying your day off today? No school, right? Right on. Well, my name is David. If you have questions, let me know, all right? I'm going to be hanging out here. I love questions, too. They're like my favorite part about my job. So what is the starting material with? So our glass that we're using here at the museum is being brought to us from North Carolina. The basic ingredients in glass is silica, potash, and soda. Those are the three main ingredients in glass. So our glass that we're using here is not your average Snapple glass or Coca-Cola glass. Oh no, this glass is a high-end glass specifically made for the process we see in front of us. So offhand glass making. This glass is formulated to stay at a malleable state for a longer period of time. Sure, we can use Coca-Cola glass in here, but the majority of the demonstration would be spent inside of the heating chamber, getting that glass hot. So we can say goodbye to our skull for right now, but it's going to come out later on. Courtney Branham is going to be checking out, making sure that this skull is at a safe temperature. This is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At the same time, Michael Schunke, our visiting artist has started the next process. So we're going to be making this goblet in a traditional Venetian style, everyone. So the first step is the centerpiece, the stem. The second part is the base that it stands on. So let's create that nice base. Ooh, I want to point out that what quickly happened on our right-hand side. So here at the Museum of Glass, we have 2,000-pound furnaces. We usually only melt clear glass, and this is the first time in our history since opening in 2002 that we've made colored glass. Now, by melting clear glass, we can use all the colors of the rainbow and not be stuck with a single color. But when you have one of the best glass makers in the United States in your studio, you can make exceptions. So for that reason, we've melted 400 pounds of this uniquely colored glass by adding a rare earth metal inside. Once we are done with this residency, we will go back to using clear glass. You're going to have an amazing view down here, all right? After every gather, we're pretty much going to be coming over here to this area. Michael Schunke's nickname is the Goblet Ninja, and you can follow him on Instagram. We have it tagged right on our hot shop floor. Want to point out that we're also raking our furnace. We're ensuring that we do not gather any impurities like air bubbles that can essentially ruin the aesthetics of our piece. And if we notice an impurity, we may just start all over again. And did we hear that? Our gaffer said, "Hey Ben, let's just start another one." So again, we don't like to settle here at the museum. We already noticed that there was something wrong. Sure, we could have just continued using it, but we would have known that there was going to be an impurity somewhere along the bubble. And since we're going to invest a lot of time into this piece, let's make sure we're setting ourselves up for success. So our rods are specifically made for glass making. They're made out of a stainless steel alloy, so it's a poor conductor of heat. But usually that gathering process really does build up the heat. Notice where our hands are located on the rod. Ben's hands are located where the rod is still shiny, not where it's discolored. If we place our hand where it's discolored, there's a higher chance that we may go home early with a severe burn. And it's Friday. We all want to enjoy our weekend, right? Is that a flat spot? So the process of using this steel table is marvering. Marver towards me? That's hard. Both ways are, so I always like to say when we're working with glass, marvering one way is easy. It's coming back to you that's the most difficult. I I feel like it's the most difficult for amateurs to turn evenly in both ways, and also supporting the weight, ensuring that we don't have a flat facade. Am I learning to work with glass? Yes, I'm. So glass making, I feel like, is. I'm learning on the job as well. So glass making is like opening Pandora's box. The more you know, the more you don't know. So when you notice the team pulling the bubble or cutting mass off, we're just thinning our mass out. So our piece can become eventually larger, but also it will weigh a lot less. And as you get better in glass making, the more you can push that bubble without it collapsing. For our audience that's joining us, we are working on what will become the stem, so the base of our goblet. An influx of an audience, so I just want to point out our temperature so we're a little familiar. The chamber on our right is the same as the one in the center. They're about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no glass inside of there, it's just fire and heat. The longer we spend inside of our glory holes, the longer the hotter the glass will get in turn. All right, so I want to point out our top head. So there's a fancy transitional bit. Glass making terms, we call this the ovolio. It's just a fancy transition, essentially. So it's made in two parts. First, a mountain or a landing pad is made, and then the actual stem or length is created. So two parts. The first part Josie brings over, our second visiting artist, and then one of our team member will take the second gather of glass and will bring that over to complete our ovolio. So after this step, after we're done shaping the ovolio, I would like to show you a diagram of a broken up goblet so we can understand what each element is. But after this ovolio is completed, let's show you that diagram. So what is a goblet and what makes a goblet? That question can be answered with our diagram to simplify each element. Our final member of our hot shop team has created our last transfer rod or punty. This is going to begin to give us the ability to work on the actual base itself. Right now, it's just a bubble, but we need to flare that out. Once that is completed, then this stem will make its way to the garage and meet the skull until we are completed with a cup. So we use centrifugal force to counteract gravity. Now, to our visiting artist, he's been doing this for 30 years, so this is second nature. Doesn't really need to think about it. But I remember when I was first learning to work with glass, instructors constantly reminded, hey, turn evenly, turn both ways. If you turn only one way, essentially you can throw that piece off center. So hand-blown glass always goes through some thinning procedure. This is just to even out the thickness of our glass, make sure that the base and the very top of our cup will have an even thickness. So we pull that thick glass off, and this is one of my favorite steps in glass making, the trimming or the removing of excess material. Now, when glass is hot at this temperature, it's like cutting leather. And that was a fantastic trim. Now, what's difficult about trimming the glass is making sure that you're cutting evenly and you're left flat and not like a weird wobbly lip, which can occur. And we can always tell the area that we will be working on next because of that bright red and orange glow. That is how we are seeing the heat. And it doesn't matter what color is worked on, it will always turn red and orange. Now, when we added our transfer rod, our punty, we also lost the ability to introduce more air into our piece. We no longer have a blowpipe. So instead, we use a different type of puffer called a soffietto. It's metal straw with a cone flare. Gives us the ability to inflate our base while minimizing any scratches that can occur. Now, this is a key detail that's occurring right now. We're heating up that very lip, so when we notice on our examples, that lip has been folded once. And that's how we're getting that thick rim on the very base of the glass. Some dude Carl left his tools here. Ooh, Ben, are you starting the actual cup now? Is it that time now? It seems like it is. So Ben's starting off with a gather of glass. This is what will become the actual cup. And through our demonstration, we'll show you a diagram on our big screen of a goblet, so we can name each individual part that constructs a goblet. Now, as our gaffer and the visiting artists finish up the base, let's follow Ben because that piece started nearly identical to what we have here, with a small Q-tip massive glass on the end of the rod. It's hard to believe, but with that bubble that Ben has can eventually be transformed to many of those parts. All right, so let's go from solid to blown. We introduce air by pressurizing the blowpipe. By placing our finger over that hole, that air has no place to go but to pierce the massive glass due to a mixture of the heat and the pressure that's created. And that gives us our starting bubble. Nearly everything that's blown out in our gallery, in our store, looked identical to what Ben has. This is where the process can begin to branch out. Now, an introduction to the massive glass revolutionized glass blowing. So the blowpipe was invented at the height of the Roman Empire, the 1st century BC, by Syrian craftsmen. There's a lot of evidence to support that they used some type of ceramic tubing as a blowpipe. Either way, our blowpipes now are made for glass making out of a stainless steel alloy That's a poor conductor of heat. By letting that core cool down a little bit, we're ensuring that we can gather more glass so our piece can be even larger. And I mentioned if you're sitting on this end, you're going to see a great view. After every gather, we will come over to this area. But the best view of the demonstration, I will highly recommend the top balcony area. We have some stunning artwork from our past visiting artists. And eventually, one of these goblets will be left here at the museum, either being displayed on our top balcony or around the museum. And here in a little while, I can join our audience in the upstairs balcony. If you want to have a conversation, that would be a good time. And again, anytime, check it out. We're using a wooden block, almost like a ladle, ensures that our bubble will continuously blow out evenly and symmetrically like a balloon and not like an irregular shape like a potato. So potato shapes can be very bad in glass blowing since it won't blow out evenly. If you have questions, let me know, everyone. Again, raise your hand, shout my name. We'll follow our team very closely for these next few steps. Besides having a wooden block to shape the mass of glass, we also use newspaper. Now, that's right, just plain old newspaper to shape the mass as well. We'll notice these steel tables everywhere in the studio. We call them a marver. Now, we refer to them as a marver because traditionally they were made out of actual marble. We use this steel table to either thicken an area of the bubble, and we can explain this process this next time around we use it. So the steel table is stealing the heat away from the glass. So notice the angle that our visiting artist is marvering, meaning that bottom half has lost some heat. So when we introduce air, the mass will expand at its most malleable state, which is that shoulder area that we didn't touch at all. So a lot of glass making is physics, how heat energy is moved from one place to another. And look at that, we can continue to cool down that bottom half as Sarah inflates air. This top portion is what is expanding. Before we go any farther in our demonstration, our gaffer is now creating a constriction called the jack line or the neckline. This is how we separate what's usable from the rod. And this step always happens very early in the process before we have a defined shape. So this is really the time that our visiting artist can dictate the type of cup that will correspond with the stem. Do we want a cup that's more like a martini glass, more shallow, taller, champagne glass? It's really the time that we can figure that out. Now, we'll notice that one of our full-time members here, Sarah Gilbert, is sitting by, prepared to blow air through the blowpipe. Let's familiarize ourselves with some of these terms. When we're asked to blow, we blow about 1 or 2 psi, the same that you use to blow out a candle. If you hear blow hard, and of course, can be a little bit more pressure than that. On the bottom of this cup lies a landing pad, another landing pad that will transition itself to the actual skull. All right, so here we go, creating another ovolio, our fancy term for our transitional bit. After this transfer, we will do one more transfer, and then we can begin to um, join everything together. With this transfer, we're just going to finish the lip area of our drinking cup. Now, with a little bit of water on the end of that constriction, a light tap, the glass will break free at its weakest point. How you liking the view up there? It's my favorite view. I always tell to everyone it's my favorite view because when it slows down there, you'll find me just sitting up there. So this residency began on Wednesday. I don't work Wednesdays, but I still had to come down here and check out Michael Schunke. It's one of the best American glass makers. This style that we're seeing is identical to the style that's being worked on in Murano, Italy. So our visiting artist is trained with two of the best Italian masters. You'll notice our second visiting artist, Josie Gluck, assisting our visiting artist. Josie has also been part of the Lino team and Dale Chihuly team. And she's also taught at Haystack Mountain School of Craft. So back in 2011, our visiting artists came together to create Vetrovero. You can always tag our visiting artists with their hashtag. Their company is based in Pennsylvania, but both of our visiting artists have a master's degree from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. Now, this time around, we're going to transition to using more wooden tools. That's just because our steel tools, although they run on beeswax, we can still scratch and stab that glass. So we're going to minimize any markings that can be left by using wood. And anytime we see wood being utilized in the studio, we can assume it's made out of some form of fruit wood, like cherry wood that contains more moisture and will last longer. So do we have any questions from our audience? Any questions? It's completely fine if you don't. So what is this thing over here? This shiny floating oven kind of. So this is called our garage. It's a temporary place where we can store glass, prevents it from breaking and cracking. 1,000 degrees on the hottest end, about 900 degrees on the coldest end. Inside of here, we have our skull and our stem. Because of this piece of equipment, we can make things in parts. If we really wanted to, we can spend a whole week making parts and then just spend one day assembling everything. It's because of this piece of equipment. What's up, my man? How can I help you? Which cup are we making? I believe we're making more one of these that we see here. By the way, a shape like this, a lobo, is considered to be one of the more difficult shapes to make in glass making. I think I've only tried it maybe like once or twice, but I completely failed at it, so I just never went back to it. Oh, and that's the ancient traditional way of measuring the cups. Possibly. But either way, we do that also so we can measure the lid, create the lid, and ensure that it's the right diameter. What's up, sweetie? How can I help you? How do you color the glass? Well, what's your favorite color? Purple. Ooh, that's a nice color. Okay, so colored glass is made by adding different metal oxides. Different metals produce different colors. I have this bar of orange. It's not purple, I'm sorry, but you can kind of hold it. You can pass it around the audience too if you would like to. So that's solid color. That's how it comes to us. Now, usually we just use a little bit of that color to color our glass. But right now, we are melting 400 pounds of this neodymium colored glass. So that's sitting inside of our furnace. We took a rare earth metal and placed it inside of our furnace, and then it's been sitting there for about a week. You can pass that around, sweetie. Show it to everyone. So usually we only melt clear glass so we can use all the colors of the rainbow. But when you have such notable artists like these two, you can always make exceptions. Once we're done with this 400 pounds of our colored glass, we will go back to using clear glass. At first, it will be a little bit contaminated with this neodymium glass, but eventually it will just wash away. This is the last time we're coming over here, okay? Until the next demonstration. Now, Josie here, she's made the final punty. This punty is a little bit different, though. A quick note that happened is we applied a little bit of our porous brick on there. What we want to do is we want to minimize the stickiness that can occur. This rod that Josie is bringing over is going to be placed on the inside of our cup. This is the traditional Venetian way that a goblet is assembled. Again, this rod is only temporary. It needs to break with a sudden tap. The last thing I want to point out before I step away from the mic is that Courtney Branham on your left-hand side, key detail is that we elevate the glass before it's brought out of the garage to ensure that it's soaking up as much heat as possible. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to put the mic down, give some nice quiet time. The last and final step that we will take is to set our finished goblet inside of the annealer. It's on our right hand side with the green number 4. It's sitting at 840 degrees, and it's going to be the home of everything that's produced here today. Yesterday, we used the annealer with the green number 1. I just checked it out right now. It's sitting at 185 degrees. So here shortly, we can open it up around lunchtime and then bring out the tops and attach them to our goblets. Again, the goblet that you see here now is not complete, but we are done with it now. Let's give this whole team a round of applause. Our visiting artists, Michael Schunke and Josie Gluck, will give a lecture at 2 p.m. this coming Sunday. Well, that was a beautiful one. Start to finish. We started at 10 o'clock. We often get asked, how long does it take to make a piece? Well, that piece took quite a while. So we asked for a few minutes to transition over here to our next project. If you have questions, let me know, everyone. I will be floating around on our big screen here. Let's introduce our Kids Design Glass program. I see a lot of little ones out in our audience. Any child 12 and under can submit a drawing. What's up, my man? You have a question before you head out of here? Ooh, so that glass rod, yes. So what's your favorite color? Blue. Ooh, I like blue colored glass too. So blue is made by adding cobalt. Maybe the red that you have in your shoes, kind of reddish, that's like gold. Gold can be used to produce red and pink glass. What's up, sweetie? So how long will it take before we can touch our pieces again? Overnight, 12 and a half hours. It is, right? So what's interesting is white colored glass is even heavier than that because it contains lead. Lead is a heavy metal, so even though the color may look small, it's really heavy. It's like a lightsaber, right? How hot is it in the ovens? It's about the same temperature as a lava flowing out of a volcano. So 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. I've tried to heat up my lunch inside of these ovens. It never works out. I always get burned food every time. So I just learned to use my kitchen instead. Even this piece of equipment right here you see in front of us, it's really hot. And all of these ovens are like industrial ovens, like the ovens you have at home. The only difference is that they're not made out of metal, rather they're made out of a porous brick material. So how do we heat it? Our fuel source here is natural gas. I don't know the exact amount of gas that we go through the museum. Um, I just know that number would break my heart, so I don't ask my superiors. Oh, okay. I already know where you're going. So our furnaces, do we keep them at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit? Are they on all year round? So the places where our furnace our glass is kept, yes, those will remain on all year round. Our furnace on the left-hand side is brand new, only a year old, but it won't be turned off for another decade. So 10 years before we do any form of maintenance to it. The glory holes in the center where we used to reheat the glass, those are turned off at night. They take about 2 to 3 hours to heat up. So although we open at 10 o'clock, we turn them on at 8 o'clock. Make sure they're hot when everyone arrives. And let's see if we can just get some transitional videos on our big screen here. believe, is to make a top. So our goblets are incomplete yet. There's a top that belongs on the top, as we can see in our examples. We're going to start on that here shortly. We want to make sure everyone is on the same page before we begin that next part. And I believe we're going to be making a raven first, and then we can start the actual top. This is if you want to roam around the museum right now is a good time as we were in our transitional phase. Just a few minutes. We just need a few minutes. Well, if you want to settle in right now, is a good time. We're going to take a photo, and then we're going to begin by creating a skull. We're going to create a finished goblet. Now, we're not going to have enough time to assemble one of them together, but we will have enough time that we can just at least make the the skull itself. This should take about an hour process. So we'll take a later lunch if we don't finish it. It's completely fine. We'll just push it. Most importantly is the skull. For this piece, it's going to be a lot of hot sculpting. The best view for this demonstration, I would recommend at the top balcony of the studio. Essentially, we're going to transform a bubble very quickly, all right? But as a quick overview, just give us a few more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. As this is occurring, let's quickly just talk about the color of our glass. You'll notice that it's this uniquely colored purple color, or purple color. It's a dichroic color glass, so depending on the light will dictate the color. Welcome back. Thanks for stopping by. You're gonna see the start process this time, all right? So when you came in here, we saw just the conclusion, everything being brought together. So let's start off. First, we pick our rod. We always preheat the rods. We look for a little red, a little orange glow. This is telling us that the glass indeed will adhere to that rod. Now, the viscosity of our glass is about warm honey, which is the reason why we're able to collect it by turning. Very similar to maybe in the morning when you're eating waffles and pancakes, syrup will naturally just stick to your fork and knife due to its thickness. The glass is playing the similar process. We're going to start off by creating a beginning bubble. Essentially, this process is how everything that you see in the gallery, in the store, started as a bubble of glass on the end of a rod. Now, right now, our mass is solid, so let's quickly turn that into a blown object by pressurizing the blowpipe. By blowing air through the rod, there is no place for that air to expand, but to pierce the massive glass because a mixture of the pressure and the heat. So science. So we're going to ensure that our bubble can continue to expand like a light bulb, evenly, symmetrically. By using a wooden block, it's going to distribute both the heat and the mass around our bubble. If you're joining us, welcome to the museum, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. I see a few members out in our audience. So, from everyone here at the Museum of Glass, we thank you for supporting the Museum of Glass. It's hard to believe this, but our bubble of glass will be transformed into a skull. It takes about an hour for this process to occur. So, when we're making a skull, we just first start off with the basic shape, the basics of the shape. Now, before we go any farther, we're just going to apply a layer of clear crushed glass. As we can see, the effect that's left over when this is done, we get more of a matte finish and we've dulled down the shininess and the glossiness of our glass. That same effect will happen to the top, the lid with a raven on it. So when we're using this powdered glass, we work with it in a safe environment where that powdered glass can be sucked out of the museum and prevents it from entering our lungs. We notice this iconic cone-shaped structure that the museum is found in. This shape is fantastic for blowing glass and or working with glass. In that fact, naturally we have a chimney with a fan at the top to accelerate the hot air rising, and right below everyone there is an air circulating system, so there's constant fresh air flowing to our shop floor. Some studios will shut down during the summer because of the heat, but not here. Because of this iconic structure, we're also able to work all year around comfortably. Now, if you're interested in seeing some of our visiting artist artwork, you can see it locally right now at the Bay Tree Gallery in downtown Seattle. It's right across the street from the Seattle Art Museum. Once again, at the Bay Tree Gallery. Is it on their website? We will have images of their work, and maybe on our Instagram is a great way to keep in touch with our visiting artists. But um, The way that this residency is going to work out is two pieces will remain here at the museum. One of these pieces will be either shown in our upstairs or right out here in our main galleries. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. For this demonstration, I recommend roaming around the museum, different angles that are available to view this intense sculpting. We're continuing to work. Let's just quickly touch bases on what we're working with. Directly in front of us, we're using a chamber 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. We refer to it as a glory hole. I have no idea where that term comes from. That's just the name it's been given for hundreds of years. Either way, that glory hole gets everything hot, and we don't need everything hot. So we're isolating the heat using this small beating torch. It's about 4,500 degrees with a mixture of propane and oxygen. Our main fuel source here is natural gas, and that's what our furnaces are fueled by. Natural gas is a low burning fuel, so you need a lot of forced air. So if you hear that kind of back noise in the studio, it's just our blower forcing in all the oxygen. Well, welcome to the museum, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. My name is David. I'm your MC here. If you have questions, let me know. Our visiting artist, or one of them, is working in the center, Michael Schunke. We consider Michael our gaffer. Our gaffer is the person who is in charge, and the gaffer will always take a seat at the center of our bench. So Michael has been working with glass for over 30 years now. His last residency at the museum was back in 2011. Now, the way that a residency works is for 5 days, our artists will take over our studio. We have a professional staff of glassmakers to play a pivotal and supportive role with our visiting artists. Some of our artisans have never worked with glass before. It's fine. That's why we have our professional team. Sometimes we have artisans who are already have established themselves in the glass industry. Our visiting artist also owns Vetrovero, a glass company based. Okay, so going a little farther back with our visiting artist. So our visiting artist has also worked with some of the greatest Italian glass makers. And so the style that you see here in front of us, it's Italian based. So this is our little trip to Murano, Italy. Again, same style that they work there with. And this school should take us about an hour to complete. We will be taking a late lunch because of this school, but it's completely fine. What is he making right now? So we are going to assemble a full goblet later on. Hopefully we can at least just make the skull. After the skull, we create the base, and after the base, it's the cup. Everything is joined together after that. Each of these pieces will remain inside of our garage. This is a temporary oven that we can place the glass and walk away from. It's going to stay warm enough that it doesn't break or crack. We can come back from lunch with our skull and then begin to join everything together. If we really wanted to, we can spend weeks or months creating small elements and then spend one day bringing everything up to temperature and then joining them together. And there's some artisans that come with that mentality. They've already made all the parts. All we need to do is just assemble. So how hot is the furnace? So the furnace, we have two of these. They're both located on both ends of the museum. They're at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about the same temperature as lava. But today we are using the furnace on our right-hand side. We don't make color here at the Museum of Glass, but since opening in 2002, this is the first time we've ever made color here at the museum. That's because we have a highly notable glassmaker in our studio right now, and we can always make exceptions. So our furnace on our right-hand side, it has 400 colors of this neodymium glass. We added a rare earth metal inside of our furnace, let it bake for a few days, and voila, 400 pounds of this colored glass. Depending on the light will dictate its color. Right now, due to this light, it looks purple, but under a fluorescent light, it looks gray, and then even under a different light, it can look blue. So we want to point out that right now we've isolated the heat on where the bottom jaw will be located, but we're just squeezing down a constriction called the jack line. The jack line is our fancy glass making term that we use to define the break-off area. So how we separate what's usable from not usable is from our jack line, and some glass makers will also refer to it as a neckline. Either way, we now have a break-off area where we can maybe add a little bit of water to break it free. Let's start thinking about the next rod that's going to be applied to the top. So a puntee needs to be brought on over. A puntee is the transfer rod. That's our fancy term that we use. It's the new handle that will be applied. We see Courtney Branham, one of our members of our hot shop staff. Now this puntee needs to be strong to withstand all the sculpting and pulling that will occur, but also needs to be weak enough to break later on with a slight tap and a little bit of water. For that reason, the puntee is one of the most difficult things to create as a glassmaker. I remember when I was first starting off still, all the cups, bowls you make, a lot of them break because that puntee was simply not good enough. Looking for that perfect Goldilocks zone, not too cold, not too hot. Depending on the project will dictate the type of punnies, and there's quite a variety of punnies to choose from as a glassmaker. So here we go, a little bit of water on our neckline or jack line, and it breaks it free. Oh, so what's the difference between the blowtorch and putting it inside of the oven? The temperatures is that the small one is about 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This giant chamber down here is about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. This gets everything hot. In this case, we only need the bottom jaw hot, so we can isolate the heat using these smaller torches. I like to say this is a general heat, this is a specific heat. You'll notice another area that we focus on is where the rod and the glass meet. It's called the moil. And we worry about that area because the steel rod will constantly draw and steal heat away from the skull. So if our piece is going to break or crack, it will first show signs at the moil area where the rod and the glass are at. So it just comes here whenever you're not. If you're joining us, welcome, welcome. Take a seat wherever you like. My favorite view is the top balcony. Anytime, join them up there. We have some stunning artwork that was made from our past visiting artists. Pretty much when we're done with this residency, one of these goblets will remain here at the museum, and it will be displayed in our top balcony or in our galleries. The rest of the artwork that's made belongs to our visiting artists. Want to point out that he has a show right now up in Seattle at the Bay Tree Gallery, just across the street or down the street from the Seattle Art Museum. You want to see some of his work? Welcome, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. So, we're creating a skull right now. We don't have enough time to make a completed goblet, but we'll take our lunch break after we're done, and then when we return, we'll go ahead and just start making the other two parts, and then we can join everything together, okay? I think. Still need a little bit more time to. For the demonstration, I would recommend roaming around the museum. The top balcony has been my favorite view for this demonstration. Yes, up there. We also have some artwork from our past visiting artists. Well, we want to thank everyone that stopped by and hang out here at the Museum of Glass. I see some members out in the audience, so thank you so much from everyone here at the Museum of Glass. We thank you for supporting the Museum of Glass. Before we put this piece away, because we are getting ready to put it away, we're going to apply another layer of this powdered clear glass. We use this powdered clear glass to eliminate the glossiness of the glass, and we're left more with the matte finish. When we're applying this powdered glass, we do it in a safe environment where that powder can be sucked out of the museum and prevents it from entering our lungs. I believe our plan is to place the finished skull inside of our garage and walk away from it. Our garage is sitting at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot enough to prevent our glass from breaking, but it's not too hot that it will cause it or manipulate it inside of our oven. This is one of the newer pieces of equipment in our studio, and it gives us the ability to start something and walk away from it. So this skull took us about an hour to make from start to finish. The goblets themselves, when completed, take about 3 hours to make. 3 hours to make, but we're more than halfway done. The skull takes the majority of the demonstration, but we are going to take our lunch break now, okay? But after that, we will come back and we'll join everything together. We'll be gone for about 1 hour. Your pass is good for the entirety of the day. I know. Your pass is good for the entirety of the day, so you can take a lunch, grab a coffee of your own, and then we can come back in here. You can also tour around the Museum of Glass. We have a brand new gallery that just opened up no more than 2 weeks ago. And if you can't return with us, you can always view everything you see on the big screen online through the web on our website and as well as our YouTube channel. You can ask your questions in the comments below, subscribe, like. Our visiting artist will continue the residency until Sunday, but on Sunday we conclude with a lecture given at 2 p.m. Explain a little bit more about the artwork that was created here. But let's give our visiting artist, Michael Schunke, and the whole Museum of Glass team a round of applause. They did an amazing job. All right, so hopefully we will see you in about 1 hour, everyone, as we return. I will stick around and answer any last few questions that our audience may have. That window up there is where all our AV crew is hanging out. So the people who are in charge of the cameras up there, they're always working hard, doing an incredible job up there.
My name's Michael Schunke. I'm from West Grove, Pennsylvania. So it's a very, very small town, about an hour southwest of Philadelphia. My work as an artist who works with glass, the foundation of it is really in vessel making and in traditional craft. I learned to blow glass about 22 years ago. About a year into when I started, I had the opportunity to work with Lino. So the foundation of the actual process there is rooted in that Venetian technique. So I have this this link to craft and tradition that I don't want to break. I don't fight it, you know, it's part of who I am. I'm a goblet maker as well as a vessel maker, and I'm always going to do it. It's a big part of who I am. The inspiration for the Crucible series comes from a number of different places, but I spent a lot of time this past year in the city of Chicago. I went over to Millennium Park and I saw the bean. I think most people are familiar with the bean. And I had seen pictures of it, but I had never seen it in person. And it was really kind of an extraordinary experience because it was this object that was doing two things. It was drawing people in while simultaneously reflecting out. And that was a tipping point for me in thinking about these sculptures because the interiors of these, the cores, is something that is either mirrored or a very highly polished brass that reflects outward. So it's the interior of the vessel being reflected outward and also reflecting whatever imagery or engraving is on the exterior of the vessel. You know, zeros about, you know, things being neutral and just trying to stay even-keeled about things, or tally marks. I did one when I turned 40 years old. I was thinking about, you know, time just moving by. That one's pretty big. That one's like that. In the series that I'm working on this week at the museum, the Crucible series, I feel these things are decidedly contemporary sculptures or objects, whatever you'd like to call them. But in the vessel making part of them, or the veil part of them, the exterior, is rooted very heavily in traditional glassmaking. While I'm pretty specific about how the shapes should look, I'm not really tied to them being exactly, you know, this size or this curve or this proportion. It just gives us a starting point of what I want to look for. You know, and I think as most people who are like rooted in a craft background might be, that these curves need to be constant, you know, no flat spots on the curves. You know, this can't be like that. And then conversely on this one that's more like an hourglass or a cooling tower, the shape has to always be moving in. So I'm constantly, you know, doing that. And then when we're on the putty and finishing the shape, Josie will actually assist me in, you know, looking at it and, you know, just pointing out an area that looks a little flat.
I think it looks good.
Okay. I have not worked here at the museum before. This is my first trip and hopefully not my last. Ben and Gabe and Nico are just the best help anybody could ask for. Back home I have one, maybe two guys helping me out. I'm doing a lot of the gathering and the lifting, so to relinquish that to them is really wonderful. These guys are super skilled and they know exactly what they're doing, so it lets me focus more on the finishing.
Here I'm just going to run the paper on that a little bit, you know. Yeah, just that whole waist.
I just really like to thank the museum for the opportunity. It's really humbling, I'm really grateful, and I promise to make the most of it. Can I be free of this now? Awesome.
Akio Takamori. I live in Seattle. My work is all figurative. I focused on people, so I kind of address the race issue and the cultural issue. The bottom line is the humanity. I'm making a figurative, so like it's about human. It's all coming from myself and my own life. My kind of a perspective changes through my life progress. All my work is basically clay, and then also I'm very much interested in working with the form and the surface, which means the form is like a three-dimensional form and the surface is, two-dimensional, so the combination of those two. I'm interested in the kind of a mystery of babies, and so this baby I made it to go on the wall. So actually, you hang on the wall and up higher, so the looks like the baby just appeared in the air. It's kind of godlike appearance, So I think it's a big difference between glass and ceramics. Ceramics is a really opaque material. I really try to kind of think about the relationship with the kind of glass as a material and light. What I like about glass process and ceramics process, both is like there's some really kind of a busy time and the firing time, and then sometimes like the piece disappears in the kiln. So like ceramics and glass have that kind of process, repeating, and which is like it's pretty interesting.
I think it's quite interesting the way they're sectioning, or the molds are kind of breaking a little bit. I mean, the way the face popped out. I think it's interesting. I really like it.
This is something like I was kind of expected will happen, and but it's really kind of interesting to see my own, figurative work, which is like light is coming through. Usually my work have a lot more kind of a clay and earthiness, but now like with this glass and with the light, have a lot more kind of a sense of a spirituality in it. Kind of seeing it, some kind of a Buddha face in there, and so like it's pretty exciting to kind of think like how much kind of information is already here, and then what kind of information I can add. So like it's really different from like what kind of information I'll give to my clay work. So which is challenging, and I'm pretty excited about thinking about that. I'm looking at those 3-4 guys working together, and then they've been working like more than 10 years together. Just like a kind of brotherhood kind of thing. Looking at those glass people working together seems like they have that, and which is I thought was quite interesting. I think like when I was young, I was more interested about controlling things, and then now like I'm just kind of excited about something is uncontrollable, then how you kind of live with it, or like how you kind of celebrate the part of it. That is kind of a become challenge. I think that more challenge, and also like a interesting part, I think.
And we coined the term slapping the rabbit. So it was like, let's slap the rabbit means let's hit the molten glass with our bare naked hand and leave a handprint. All the hands who want to see us slap the rabbit again, we're going to slap it. Slap the rabbit. I've come here to the Museum of Glass precisely to make things just like this piece that I've never made before, patterns I've never used before. I can see what it's going to be. I can see what it's going to be. Looks totally amazing. That was awesome.
I'm Corey Metcalf. One half of Noisefold. I live in Montrose, Colorado.
And I'm David Stout, the other half of Noisefold, and I live in Denton, Texas, which is on the north side of Dallas.
We think of noise not so much as a sound you don't really want to hear. We think of noise more as kind of a prima materia, the field of all possibility. And so we're interested in this idea of filtering or folding that information and finding form within that.
And when we use this technique in our performances, one of the things we do is that we simultaneously generate an image and take the data that comprises that image and turn it back into sound.
So this project for the Museum of Glass, we're creating obviously stable, solid forms, but it comes out of our practice of actually animating in pretty wild and very organic ways, basically mathematical surfaces, structures that are created through basically visualizing mathematical differential equations. And so we've created a system that allows us to take these surfaces and do many different things to sculpt them in real time and to animate the way that they behave and move. So we set up a virtual reality interface that allows the gaffers to get right in there and actually use a controller to rotate the forms around, change the scale, even get inside the thing if they want to.
And we found in our initial experiments that it really helped the gaffers because they quite literally could get inside and around and look at a difficult surface or component that isn't really that easily seen on a screen.
We always ask for as many drawings as we can have, and you know, with this we can look at it from any perspective. Oh, you need a punny? Okay, hold on, let me get out of here.
When we started out as Noisefold, we took a lot of equations that were put together on an open source database by Paul Bork, who's an Australian astrophysicist. And very quickly we were using techniques to blend that data, blend that geometry. And so what you end up with is these highly complex, novel forms.
We can generate much crazier forms. We're not doing that.
And we could iterate on forms that are much more traditional glass forms and make really interesting vases and things that would be more common to the glass vocabulary.
But we're trying to go for that sweet spot where it's something that we think speculatively could be made in glass, but is just a little bit harder than might be the typical form.
Or considerably more difficult, but still within the realm of possibility.
Within the realm of possibility.
While these do stand alone from the new media works that we make in terms of the projected or immersive installation environments and performances, we're definitely thinking about ways of bringing the two into conversation. And so taking the forms that we've digitally prototyped and figuring out ways of combining them in exhibition spaces with the actual glass objects that come out of the process. So we have to wait till they come out of the oven, of course, which is another different aspect of this process than the digital. And the other thing, of course, you can't just buy an extra hard drive when you get too many glass objects.